Court-appointed guardians are getting a lot of attention lately. First, singer Britney Spears is battling with her father over his control of her money and other life decisions. And there's this.
She forces them into the home, auctions off their house, and uses the proceeds to pay herself.
Because caring is my job.
This is from the new Netflix film, I Care a Lot. In it, Golden Globe winner Rosamund Pike plays an evil legal guardian. She gets rich while draining the life savings of senior citizens and legally stopping family members from seeing them. Joining me now is Karl Prior. Prior is a partner in the law firm Mannion Prior, based in King of Prussia. He specializes in part in guardianship and incapacity proceedings. Thanks so much for being here, Karl.
Thank you, Tracy. Thanks for having me.
Okay, for those of us who are not all that familiar, what is guardianship, or conservatorship as it's called in some states?
Guardianship is when someone who, either by virtue of age or some other issue, could be mental health, could be alcoholism, can no longer manage the affairs either their financial affairs or their day-to-day daily living affairs, the instrumental affairs of daily living, like shopping, things like that. And what happens in those cases is that a court, if there is no one available to help that person, will appoint a guardian or a custodian to come in and to manage that person's financial or everyday lifetime affairs.
So the whole Britney Spears story has really brought this to the forefront. More people are talking about it and learning about it. She's been under her father's control since 2008. And every time we hear about it, we hear about another hearing, another hearing. How do you come out from under that?
It's very difficult to. If you can imagine, Tracy, it's sort of like a tsunami, a wave that comes at you because there is significant momentum inherent in the allegation itself. In other words, it's pretty serious to say someone can't handle their own affairs. And courts take those allegations very seriously. And in particular, in the Britney case, for example, she was deprived of the ability to hire her own lawyer. Well, once that happens, you've got a tsunami coming against you. Very difficult to get out from under it unless, for example, you can get yourself medically reevaluated, maybe come forward with some expert reports. In Pennsylvania, you have a right to seek modification of guardianship decrees. So if some judge ever did declare you to be incapacitated, you have a statutory right to come back in and have that issue revisited.
So can something like the movie I Care a Lot happen in real life? I mean, she gets control of somebody's everything, knocks on the door and says, I now pretty much control you, all of your assets. Can that really happen?
To a degree, it is possible, although not probable. There are some protections inherent in the system, procedural rights to lawyers and other things. But yeah, it can happen. I mean, I've seen it happen where I've had a client who was told they needed to be in court on less than 10 hours notice for an emergency guardianship proceeding the next day. We had to show up, and by the time we arrived, you know, the momentum was going pretty aggressively against the client. The court already had another lawyer in mind to appoint as an emergency guardian. And the process can get out of control in a hurry unless you're protected in advance or unless you bring in immediate protection in the form of good counsel.
Well, you can certainly see the benefits, but you can also certainly see how this could be abused. Talk more about the oversight that exists.
So typically, the oversight is that guardians are required to file annual reports with the courts listing what the assets are that the alleged incapacitated person has, or that the incapacitated person has. And it's a little bit technical, but they're not really supposed to invade those assets without seeking court approval or court oversight. So at least once a year, reports are being filed accounting for what a guardian is doing with that person's assets. And typically, a report is also filed as to what the guardian is doing with the person's medical affairs, their personal affairs, where that person is living, who is visiting, who the caregivers are.
And you can see where this can be very helpful to a lot of families, or for people who don't have families, with somebody taking care of it. That's the intent of this, I'm sure.
It is the intent, but like all things where there's good intent can be taken advantage of. And, you know, the courts tend to naturally err on the side of protecting people. Sometimes they do so a little bit expeditiously. If you're a judge, think about it. You'd rather err on the side of protecting someone than perhaps on the side of their rights. And things can spin out of control in a hurry when it goes south. Not because anybody's acting necessarily from a malevolent intent, but just sometimes the best intentions can result in people losing freedoms that they maybe shouldn't necessarily be losing.
Right. Attorney Karl Prior with Mannion Prior, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Tracy.